Well, I'm happy to welcome a very esteemed colleague, Congressman Jim McGovern, to come be our next speaker. He is serving in his 10th term in Congress and represents the 2nd District of Massachusetts, which shares an extensive border with the district that I represent and that you all are part of, the 3rd District, and that border is through central Massachusetts. The proximity of our districts and the shared interests of several communities that we each represent has given me the opportunity to work closely with Jim on a number of key initiatives, and I have valued our partnership. In Washington, he is regarded as a leader on education, healthcare, ending hunger, and human rights. He brings great passion to all of these issues, and we're fortunate for it. Jim serves as the 2nd-ranking Democrat on the powerful House Rules Committee, which sets the terms for debate and amendments on most legislation, and we look forward to the day in which he will either be the ranking member or the chairman, hopefully the chairman. Last year, he created a Cuba working group aimed at restoring relations with Cuba and building upon the Obama administration's effort to lift travel restrictions and broaden trade. Last month, he joined the president as he became the first sitting president to visit Cuba in 88 years. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jim McGovern.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me thank Nikki Sagas, who I love, and who does an extraordinary job. And as she pointed out, our districts, share a border, and we work as a team. And I think that's true of the entire delegation. We're very, very lucky we have a delegation that actually likes one another. A lot of delegations, and it has nothing to do with Republican versus Democrat, don't get along very well. We're the opposite. We actually do get along, and we try to make sure we have each other's back. And if there's something that's important that's going on in Nikki's district, that we all join with her to try to make it happen. And if something's important going on in my district, everybody comes to my aid and has my back. So I think that's a good thing, especially during these difficult times with limited federal resources, that we work as a team. And so it's really a pleasure to serve with our team, and especially a pleasure to serve with Nikki. Now, I know you've heard from a lot of people, so I don't want to repeat what everybody else has been saying, but the political climate here is crazy, all right? And it is a little bit frustrating right now because there's a lot that needs to be done. I mean, we have great infrastructure needs all over this country. We have infrastructure needs in Massachusetts. We have aging roads and bridges that need to be repaired. I tell people all the time, we've got bridges in Massachusetts that are older than most of the other states in the country, and they need attention. We have aging water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure that needs to be repaired and upgraded. I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of weeks ago with Democratic leader Pelosi, and we did a town hall meeting in Flint, Michigan, listening to the residents of that community talk about what they went through with the elevated lead levels in their water. And I had to remind myself as I was listening to the testimony that this is the United States of America. It's not a third world country. And yet the idea that there are places in this country where people can't trust that the water that comes out of their faucet is safe for them and their families is absolutely unacceptable. But here's the deal. In order to fix it, it requires some investment. And if we keep on embracing these policies of austerity and cuts, then there won't be the investment to make the necessary improvements. The same on the state level as well. You know, being in politics, I'm used to going to events where people tell me all the time, we need a tax cut, or you need to cut government more. Usually when you ask them, well, like, where would you want to cut government? Sometimes people are a little bit vague in terms of where they want to cut. It's always somebody else's program. But the fact of the matter is that if we don't make these necessary investments, we're not going to grow economically. I mean, I see that all throughout my district. I'm sure all throughout Nikki's district as well. One of the keys to economic development is an infrastructure that represents the 21st century. We need good roads. We need good bridges. We need commuter rail. We need airports that work. We need to make it easy for people to get in and out of these areas. I was at the Logan Airport last Friday, and very proud of this initiative that I think we have helped pushed Massport to embrace, which is putting on display at Logan Airport all the incredible things that we have to offer in our state. You know, Massachusetts is more than just Boston. There are historic sites in Nikki's district, historic sites in my district. There are great places to hike and there are great farms, and there are great restaurants, and there are great bed and breakfasts, and there are great, you know, everything to make it a destination point. We need to do a better job of promoting what we have to offer in central Massachusetts and all throughout the state. They have a new Johnny Appleseed statue at Logan Airport, which is incredible because everybody's stopping by and looking at it like, who is that? And they read, it's Johnny Appleseed. Oh, I didn't know he was from Massachusetts. Oh, he's from Massachusetts. Yeah, he's from Leominster. Oh, you know, and there's a little, a little plaque on the bottom that tells you how you get more information. And what we're finding is that these our tourism bureaus and our chambers of commerce, as a result of this, are getting more and more hits. You know, they had a display on the North Quabbin region. It's the most breathtakingly beautiful picture of the Quabbin Reservoir from high up on a mountain with the most magnificent colors. And you don't see the reservoir, all you see is clouds where the reservoir is. But the chamber out there was reporting like 700 hits from overseas, not even counting what people who are living in the United States are doing. So we need to understand that one of the ways that we're going to revitalize our economies in some of these areas is through tourism. And we need to do a better job about bragging about it. And that's why this initiative with Massport is so important. Millions of people go through in and out of Logan Airport every year. And prior to this, you learn nothing about Massachusetts. I remember I used to get off, when US Air was still running, I used to get off at US Air and the Dalai Lama would greet me as I came up. I loved the Dalai Lama, but he didn't do anything to promote tourism in my district or in Nikki's district. So, you know, but a picture of the Quabbin Reservoir or Mount Wachusett or Johnny Appleseed, it does. And so we need to work together to be aggressive about promoting all the great things that we have in our area. Let me just touch on a couple other things, because Nikki mentioned Cuba. And look, I've been pushing for a long time to change our policy toward Cuba. I've always thought that the economic embargo and the travel restrictions were pretty stupid. It didn't help the Cuban people, didn't change anything in Cuba. It just was used as an excuse by the hardliners down there to justify an oppressive system. I think that the best ambassadors for the United States are people and businesses. And I think the more interaction, the more the political space opens up. And I think that Cuba represents a market, quite frankly, that you know, is very receptive for U.S. goods. Right now, they buy everything from Canada, from Europe, and from China, and from Russia. It's cheaper to get things from the United States. I mean, and they need everything. You know, I mean, everything from basic tools to cranberries. I mean, everything that we make. They have a growing pharmaceutical and biotech industry. We do too. We ought to be promoting collaborations there to find out, you know, how we can work together. You know, some people think, you know, well, Cuba has a biotech industry. They do, and by the way, it's well respected all around the world. They've developed a drug that actually had great success in healing diabetic wounds. But because of our crazy laws in the United States, we can't have access to it. We can't even test it here in the United States. And there are things that we have here that would benefit people who live on the island. So we ought to be engaged in that kind of collaboration. So I hope that everybody here will go to Cuba between now and December. We're happy to work with you on facilitating that. And the reason why I think it's important is because I don't know who the next president is going to be. Maybe you figured that out before I got here. But if it's somebody who I don't want to be president, they could easily reverse everything that this president has done, because everything that has been done up to this point is through executive order. And I think the more collaborations, then the more that we can get done in the short term, the better. to make it impossible to turn back to a Cold War policy. Just one final thing, and then I'm happy to take questions or whatever, and that is that, as Nikki mentioned, I do a lot of work on hunger and food insecurity issues. And one of the things that bothers me greatly is that today in the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world, there are close to 50 million people who are hungry. 17 million of them are kids. And there's not a single congressional district in the United States that is hunger-free. I spent a night at a family homeless shelter in Worcester. There are very few shelters that take entire families. This is one of them. And I was surprised to learn that every adult worked. They all worked. They worked at low-paying jobs, obviously, but they worked a little bit. They couldn't afford the down payment on an apartment, couldn't afford rent, trying to be good parents, worked a little bit, earned a little bit of money, saw their daycare benefit cut, saw their food stamps cut, and they're in this kind of trap. They hit this cliff. And we need to figure out, we need to have a conversation about how we help people get out of poverty. Because it is in our national interest, it's in the interest of improving all of our economies. People out there today are working really hard, trying to do the right thing, but are trapped. And there's a flaw in our system that makes it difficult for people to make that transition. And look, I think we obviously want to see people get paid better wages, but we also will be talking about things like how do we maybe keep some of these benefits with people just a little bit longer until they get to the point where they don't need them anymore. Because ultimately our goal ought to be to help people succeed. And and as I sat with these families, I realized that life can be very, very complicated. I had a couple, both were working at Price Chopper in Webster. And the husband was working the night shift and the wife was working the day shift. Her mother, who lived halfway across the state, was diagnosed with incurable cancer. So she decided to spend the remaining weeks of her mother's life with her mother at her home. So she had to give up her job. But they had 3 little kids at home, and the husband couldn't leave the kids at home at night when he worked, so he had to give up his job temporarily, fell behind on his rent, and then the next thing, they're homeless. There are a lot of people that fall into that category, and being poor in this country is hard work. And unfortunately, here in Washington, the discussion on poverty has been about demonizing people who fall into poverty. It's been about diminishing their struggle, and as a result, rather than talking about solutions about how do we get people, out of poverty, we're talking about things like cutting SNAP even more. By the way, the average food stamp benefit is $1.40 per person per meal. That's it. We're talking about drug testing people who are on SNAP, notwithstanding the fact that we know that more people use drugs who aren't on public assistance than do. We just got a letter from 11 governors saying that we want you to drug test everybody who's on SNAP. I want to introduce an amendment and say we want to drug test all these governors to sign that letter, because they must be on drugs if that's the way they think that we're going to solve any of these problems. So we got some serious issues here to deal with, and we're going to go. We got the silly season between now and the election. But when we get through with this election, I mean, people really need to insist on having thoughtful conversations about issues like poverty, health care, making education more affordable. I mean, all those things are really vital to have those discussions on, and I hope we can do it. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in this. And I want to thank Nikki for her leadership on so many issues, and I'm proud that she's my colleague. So thank you very much.
Well, as you can see, we do have a remarkable delegation, and our interests take us in a broad array of places, but we're so fortunate to have someone like Jim with the passion that he does. Just want to tell you a quick story about hunger in this country. When I first got elected in Massachusetts, when I first got elected to Congress, I took a visit to the high school in Lawrence, and I met with the woman who was in charge providing food to all the students. And she told me about they have a breakfast program in the morning so that the many young people who do not get breakfast at home as they come to school are able to have a nutritious breakfast. And the story she told me was that, on Friday, they do it every day. On Fridays, there's not many people who come in, there's not a lot of attendance to it. But on Mondays, the line is out the door because children have been at home, high school students have been at home for the weekend, and they have not had access to food. So it's a real issue, and I appreciate very much the leadership that Congressman McGovern has provided around it.